Hello everybody. In this presentation we're going to take an introductory look at the Unity 3D interface. We're going to translate some early map sketches that we created into the Unity environment. And this is intended to be an exercise to get some experience translating some of your ideas into Unity using some of the basic terrain tools that are available inside Unity. So by now I expect that you've had a chance to download and install Unity. And I've launched Unity, and I'll just jump right in and give you a quick tour of the interface. Now, by default, the first time I launch Unity, once I get it registered, I should be looking at a default scene that's provided with Unity. It's called Angry Bots, and it should load by default. And if it doesn't, that's okay. There's ways that you can download it and activate it, but the intent of this presentation is just to get you oriented to the interface and talk about some of the panels so that we have an expectation of what we're looking at when we launch Unity. So once I launch Unity, the first thing that I'm presented with is this Welcome to Unity screen, and I want to draw your attention to it because there's some valuable information that's in here. There's some great orientation material, and I suggest that you take a look at some of that stuff. And as we take a deeper dive into Unity, we'll want to do some research on some problems that we might create for ourselves, and we can find lots of answers under this Unity Answers link. There's also a great community forum where there's lots of active Unity users out there, and you might find yourself with some really challenging issues that you've created for yourself, and the Unity forum is a really great place to find support for highly specific issues that you might be running into. We'll talk more about that later as we jump into Project 2. But for now, I just want to focus on the Unity 3D interface. So I'm going to close the Unity welcome screen. And when we first look at Unity, the most dominant screen is our scene panel. And our scene panel is typical of a 3D environment. We're looking at a 3D perspective view. In the top right-hand corner, we have a scene widget, and this is a very helpful tool to help navigate around the scene. Along the top of our interface, we have our basic play, pause, and advance buttons to run our simulation or our game. In the far left-hand corner, we have the basic move, rotate, and scale tools to interact with our individual 3D objects inside of our game scene. To the left of that, we have some basic view controls. I can click on this little glove hand, and that will give me the ability to pan around my scene. Now, I'll share with you a couple of quick keys in order to navigate inside this 3D space. And it's not a bad idea just to kind of experiment with this to get a sense of how to interface with this environment. So I'm on a Mac, just a reminder, and I have a proper two-button mouse, but I'm going to stay focused on the primary click or a left click or a single click. And I'm going to hold down the Option key and click and drag my mouse left and right, and that gives me the ability to orbit around my scene. As I click and drag around, I'm continuing to orbit inside this environment. If I hold down Option Command and click and drag, now I can pan inside the environment, and if I hold Control and Option and drag left and right, I can zoom in and out in my scene. I can also choose just to right-click inside my view, and I start to orbit around the point of my right click. If I have a wheel mouse, I can use my mouse wheel to zoom in and out of the scene. So those are just some basic navigation strategies. In the top right-hand corner, we have this scene widget, and this is a very valuable thing. We'll take a deeper dive into this tool once we start actually creating our landscape. But the basic concept here is that if you want to look down a specific axis, you can use this scene widget to look at a profile view. In this case, I'll look at the x-axis. I can roll my mouse over the red x-axis, and I click on that, and now I'm looking at the side profile view. I can pan inside my scene, and I can continue to orbit just like I normally would, but this is a great way to quickly frame a view based on an axis. Now, just a reminder, this interface is set up as a typical 3D interface. We have our y-axis, which is orientation is up and down. We have our x-axis, which is left and right. And then we have our z-axis, which runs back in space. And as we orbit around our scene, you can see that our scene widget will orbit as well to keep us oriented in the space. So we can orbit around and navigate this scene, and if we want to take a look at a flat view, maybe look down the y-axis, we can click on the y-axis widget. If we want to go back to a default perspective view, we can just click on this block right in the center of the widget. Try that again. Click on this block right in the center of the widget, and for some reason my widget isn't cooperating, so I'll just manually orbit. But you get the idea of what capabilities this widget is giving to you. So we have our standard 3D interface. We're looking through our game scene here. On the left side of the screen, we have our hierarchy view. And our hierarchy view is very similar to the object manager inside Cinema 4D. All of the active objects inside of our scene view can be found inside our hierarchy view. And we can use the hierarchy view to select different objects. And as you can see, these different objects have a parent-child relationship. So as we group objects, we can nest objects inside others. So we can group objects based on the type of object that they are, how we want them organized. And so as I click through here, you can see that I have different elements that I can select. I can reveal and hide each object hierarchy by clicking and toggling this triangle. So if I want to see the contents of these steam pipes, I can click to reveal the children of this object. I can click on this triangle again to collapse those. So as I move through, I can select these different objects. And if I select on an object and I want to frame that to my selection, as long as my mouse is over the scene view and I have an object selected, I can tap the F key. That's F as in Frank. And that will frame the selected object that I have. So this can be a very valuable trick in that if I want to look at this group of lights, or if I want to look at a specific light, I can grab one specific light, I can roll my mouse over the scene view and tap the F key. And that will zoom into the object that's been selected. So we have our hierarchy view. This is the place where we're going to create objects. We're going to add objects from our project view. We're going to add assets to our active game view using the hierarchy panel. Just below that, we have our project panel. Now, the project panel, we can think of this as our folder of assets that we've established on our computer. We'll talk a little bit more about this later when we create our first project. Over on the right side, we have our inspector. And you may have noticed that as I was clicking around and selecting different objects, my inspector window was changing. This is very similar to the attributes manager inside Cinema 4D. And the idea here is that when I select on an object, it'll give me contextually sensitive information about the object that I have selected. We'll take a closer look at what some of these components are once we create our own scene. But you can tell that depending on the object that you have selected, you're going to get different parameters that show up inside the inspector panel. So as I select on a light, you can see that I have different parameters available here. So at this point, what I'd like you to do is just make sure that you've downloaded Unity, you've installed it and launched it, and you get acclimated to navigating inside this 3D interface. So again, we have the scene view. This shows us our active game scene, our active 3D environment. Our hierarchy view is going to show us all of the active objects that are inside this scene. Our project view is going to show us all of the assets, all of our scene files, and everything that's existing on our computer that goes into the creation of the game. And then on the right side, we have our inspector panel, which is based on the context of whatever object we have selected. That's the basic overview. Make sure that you orient yourself and you grow comfortable with navigating inside this 3D space. In the next presentation, we'll start to create a project and create some assets of our own.